Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sunday in our virtual summit. And we're starting things today with Ginger Fedak. She's been a lifelong advocate for wild horses, domestic and wild. Um, she formerly worked for In Defense of Animals, and her work has appeared in the Observatory, AlterNet, Countercurrents, Counterpunch, LA Progressive, and Nation of Change. Ginger's going to talk to us today about um, working with domestic and wild horses and horsemanship. So I will turn it over to her and she can tell you a little bit more about her and her presentation. Just as a reminder, everybody is muted and your videos are turned off. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them after Ginger's presentation. So thank you, Ginger, and welcome everybody.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It's been a very rewarding experience starting years ago with when we started doing these presentations. Uh, can everybody see this first slide?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to be talking about a range of related topics that are related to using Mustangs in a lesson program. And this involves training methods and how to recognize when a horse is not fitting in a particular situation. The natural horsemanship training methods, it's one specific way that helps us with this. So that's what I'm going to talk about first is natural horsemanship training methods to help us recognize what each horse needs. So um, wild horses really have so much to teach us about natural horsemanship methods because there's no more pure way to understand natural horse behaviors than in sitting and observing wild horses in their natural setting for thousands of hours. So that's kind of where I'm going with this and how we use it in our lesson programs to determine if a horse is suitable for using in a lesson program. So just learning to understand any horse's natural behavior and movement is paramount to finding the horse's path, whether it is a specific discipline as a lesson horse or just for individual riders. I'm going to be showing slides from my horse camp lesson program. This is mainly just to give you something to look at while I'm talking about natural horsemanship, but it's also a way for you to watch the horse's expression and demeanor and see how that exceptional horse is taking care of these young riding students. All of these horses that we had in our program when I had my Sun Pony Ranch business, all of these horses were either taken directly out of the slaughter pipeline or they would have gone into the slaughter pipeline if they had gone into other hands uh, that were not uh, good people to take these horses. So these photos are going to go in the order of kind of how we started our students that were beginners and moving up to a little more experienced in our horse camps. We first taught them position and posture and balance, etc. At a walk, then we moved into learning how to post the trot, and this was either in Western saddle or English saddle. They all used direct rein, whether they were riding in a little tiny 10-inch beginner a Western saddle or in an English saddle. So they all learned direct rein and keeping their hands down so as not to impede their horse who was helping them learn. So they went from learning to walk to posting the trot to learning how to canter if they were ready with their balance, learning how to weave through a cone pattern, which is kind of like pole bending, but with cones, learning how to weave through that with directional steering and cues to their horse. They would start it at a walk, and if then they would learn how to do it at a trot, where they had to be much more competent. Then they learned how to take their horse over a cavaletti, either at low, medium, or high position. The more advanced students actually learned how to do cross rail jumping and vertical jumping as they were ready to go. But most of these photos are of beginners learning the easier disciplines. Okay, so I want to talk about how I started with my natural horsemanship learning. When I was 16 years old, I was an instructor at a riding lesson barn, and the trainer there was my mentor who taught me natural horsemanship techniques in training his 2-year-old horses that he brought up from his farm. This was in Ohio, and the trainer used me to help train his 2-year-olds because I was very lightweight at that time and a decent enough rider. And his method that I just think now was so genius and so advanced for that time, when things were intimidation training most of the time. So his method was to have me ride the young 2-year-old horse behind behind a mare, an older mare who was well trained. There would be another advanced rider riding the older mare in front of me on this young 2-year-old horse. And as the 2-year-old would follow the older mare, just naturally follow her, he would follow her movements. And as he was doing so, I would give him the cues that were for those movements. And this way, when the mare in front of us transitioned up and transitioned down and turned, I was giving those cues, and the young horse learned to associate those cues with those movements. And I just can't think of a better way to start a young horse. They used to call it breaking, but now we don't like that term. We call it starting. I can't think of a better way to start a young horse than just to have them naturally follow an older mare and just do it without any intimidation, force, pressure, or anything. And they just pick it up. So since then, I've just kind of studied more current natural horsemanship techniques. I worked with a 4-star Pirelli instructor and other natural horsemanship things. And from all these different ones, I developed my own natural horsemanship philosophy to use with lesson horses because lesson horses are really special. They have to have the tolerance and disposition necessary for working with all types of riders and of all sizes and ages. So I developed my own methods, and most natural horsemanship programs are geared to individual riders with their individual horses. That's what Pirelli does, and a lot of what these other ones do. So it's much different when you're working with one horse, one rider, and training them than when you're trying to work with a horse that's going to have multiple different riders of different abilities. So that's why I kind of worked to develop my own program. It takes a special kind of horse to have the tolerance for working with beginner riders. Some horses just do not have this tolerance level. Many horses do not. It's just too confusing for them and they get anxiety. I will say, with my natural horsemanship learning, I learned so much more from my last 20 plus years of observing wild horses in their natural habitat on the range. Just observing the horses that were wild and free and their behavior towards each other and individually is just exponential learning as far as understanding horse behavior. So that helped me so much more than in my earlier years, uh, prior to when I started learning so much and visiting wild horse herds.
Ginger, we're
Yeah.
still on the first slide. I didn't know if that's where we should still be.
Oh, yeah, you're right. While I'm talking about this, I should be starting to move slides, and I'm not going to talk about each individual slide. You can just kind of see what's going on as I'm talking about it. So, my natural horsemanship philosophy strongly incorporates what does the horse love to do naturally? How does he or she naturally carry their body and their head? When we recognize that and figure it out, we are halfway there to a good partnership with the horse. It wouldn't be prudent to ask a horse whose natural gaits are long with low head carriage to be a dressage horse. That would be unnatural and uncomfortable for them. It wouldn't be wise to ask a horse who needs constant motivation to go to be a racehorse. That horse must love to run. And when I was in college, I I bought my first horse. My first horse was a quarter horse, and his mother was a quarter horse racing horse. And if you know about quarter horse racing, you know that there's a lot of thoroughbred blood that's bred into some of those horses. They are registered quarter horses, but down the line they have thoroughbred blood. And my horse's mare, his mother, was a racing quarter horse, and so she looked a little more thoroughbred and had high head carriage. So my quarter horse had a very high head carriage. And when I was in school in college in West Texas, the cowboys, my friends, would just kid me and tell me, you've got to put a tie down on that horse. You've got to get him to lower his head. And I would just get sassy and retort to them, I am not going to try to force my horse into movement that's not natural for him. So even at when I was 20 years old, I realized I did not want to impede my horse's natural movement. I wanted him to do whatever he needed to do to be comfortable. And so even when we were barrel racing, that horse kept his head high, and but he did fine. So the point is you want the horse to fit into what you're asking him to do. Um, we do not want to use horses that do not like the anxiety or confusion of multiple beginning horses, beginning riders to actually be on them constantly changing. Some horses just cannot tolerate that. So we have to be able to recognize that if we're going to use them in uh, a lesson program, whether they are domestic horses or wild, we have to understand what their personality needs, and natural horsemanship helps us to do that. Most horses want to understand and please if they have a good bond. I cannot tell you how many times I have had during the middle of a lesson, a horse simply walk out of line and walk up to me and tell me they are confused. They don't know what the rider is asking. Please help me. I mean, it's either by a look while they're still in the line, they will look to me with that confusion on their face and asking for help from me, or they'll actually walk into where I'm standing and ask me. And I have a picture later that's going to show that. Anyway, for an example of one particular Mustang who we did put in a lesson program, I'm going to tell you about my first Mustang. My first Mustang was named Chaco. None of these pictures are of him because my external hard drive that I have all his pictures on is lost. I don't know where it is. It's somewhere here, but I can't find it. So I'm sorry, none of these pictures are of Chaco, but I have a few pictures of him later. So Chaco was adopted by us. I had two business partners who helped me start this business. He was adopted by us for our lesson program from the BLM facility in Canyon City, Colorado. This was part of the Wild Inmate Training Program, also known as WHIP, WHIP, Wild Horse Inmate Program, where they would take horses that have been gathered off the range and turn them into a training program where the inmates would work under a seasoned trainer to train these horses. Then they would be adopted, offered for adoption, and they were very, very popular in the BLM's adoption program. This wild horse inmate program at the time was run by a man named Fran Ackley, and he was one of those good BLM employees. He truly loved and cared about the horses and wanted the best for them. This because the Canyon City facility was a prison. It was under tight control, but when Fran was in charge of it, people were allowed to visit and adopt horses every 2 weeks, and it was a smooth process. But finally, as you may have heard about, this facility in Canyon City was just closed last November, I believe. When Fran Ackley ran it, it was a very well-run program, as I said, but when he left, a man named Steve Leonard took over, and he wasn't anywhere near as good. And the program became kind of run down and ineffective. People could hardly ever get in to look at the horses. And finally, the WHIP program was closed a few years ago. But then just recently, the entire facility was closed at Canyon City, and the BLM moved all the horses there, 2,300 of them. Most of them went to other BLM facilities in Wyoming or in Utah. A few went to the Wild Horse Refuge that you heard Scott talk about the other day. Probably about 100 of them that were Colorado wild horses went there. I don't know if our Mustang that we named Chaco had a name when he was on the Wild Horse Range. He was from the Great Divide Basin in Wyoming, and after they captured his herd there, he was transferred down to the Canyon City facility in Colorado. Chaco was only a yearling when his herd was captured, and he was separated at that time from the only family and the only life he ever knew. Sorry, I don't mean to get emotional, but he was separated from the only life he ever knew as just such a young horse, confused and unsure. Okay, I'm gonna skip to some of my slides now about the Canyon City training program. and what um, what Chaco went through there. So when Chaco was transferred to Canyon City, he he was just stuck in the holding pens for quite a while. He was actually in BLM holding for a year and a half. And he was evaluated once he got to a certain age. He was evaluated by the trainer and staff there, where they look for disposition and confirmation and just readiness to perhaps be willing enough to be in a um, training program for saddle training. And he was deemed to be ready for that when he was 3 years old. And so they began his training. Again, at that time, the person, Fran, in charge of the program at Canyon City was really, really good, and the horses were well taken care of. The inmates who trained them were extremely well qualified as far as their vetting process went. They had to have the temperament to work with the horses using oh, here's the picture I was telling you about. If you look closely at this picture, you can see that Romeo, this is on horse show day where the kids decorate their horses and then they have their picture taken with them. And this little girl just wanted to kiss Romeo on his forehead. And you can see Romeo looking at me. You can look at his eyes and you can see him looking directly at me, trying to take his picture, asking, "Is this okay? And what am I supposed to do here?" He was a little confused and worried. So that's just to show you the look that I get sometimes from these horses when they don't understand what their little beginner riders are asking them to do. But anyway, this is the vet sheet that came from the BLM, and you can see down here on his first vaccination record was October of 2003. Then it also gave his deworming records over here. And then his last vaccination was in January of 2005. And we obtained rights to him in March of 2005. This is the WHIP program, the Wild Horse Inmate Program info sheet with frequently asked questions. It talks about what a saddle trained horse from their facility should do once he's ready. And this talks about what types of training methods that they use at the WHIP program to train the horses, and they only use resistance-free training, which is good. It's not exactly natural horsemanship training methods, but it takes the horse. It's a much gentler method than intimidation. This is an info sheet from WHIP, which describes how amazing Mustangs are. And again, this is when Fran Ackley was in charge, and so it was a really nice piece about how wonderful Mustangs are, how versatile they are, and how they make wonderful horses for adoption. This was our adoption application. It was filled out by my partner, David, and Dave was not a horse person. His wife, my other partner, Monica, had her own horse, but Dave was just very much a beginner rider. But his main job in our business was to be in charge of our dog kennel, doggy daycare, and dog boarding business. But he filled out this application. Actually, looks like I filled out the application. He put his name on it. And then this is our acceptance letter that they accepted our application to adopt a horse. And then this is just a page of notes from my conversations with the BLM staff, both Fran and Lona were helping me to find a horse that they thought would be good for our lesson program. And it's just the basic notes on, excuse me, how to go ahead and get into the queue to get a horse on hold for us, because if you didn't get into the queue at the right time, you were not going to be able to get that horse. Also, at the bottom here, oops, at the bottom here, it's specific conversations about a horse that they had named Bam Bam that they told us would, their recommendation was that he would be a good horse for our program. This is the info sheet that they put out at that time about the horses that were going to be coming available at um, the next online time where we could call in and put a hold on the horse. And you can see Bam Bam's down here in this lower corner, described as a 3-year-old excuse me, a 3-year-old buckskin gelding, 14.2 hands tall. This is the photos that the WHIP program took of Bam Bam when he was in training. These photos only show the training supervisor there because they did not take photos of the inmates. That just wasn't allowed. All right, this is the BLM letter explaining our receipt of the title of Bam Bam, or this particular Mustang, that we had held him for a year and received title. And then here's our title. You all know about how when you adopt a horse from BLM, you have to hold him in good standing for a year before you receive title. So after we began researching the horses that were available that might be good for our lesson program, and both Fran and Lona recommended Bam Bam, on the days the horses were listed on the website, I was at work and I had to keep checking my work computer to see when they went live online. And as soon as they went live online, I took claim, got in the queue for Bam Bam, was first in the list. And it was a good thing we got in when we did, because very soon after that, there were 5 more people in back of us who wanted him. So this was in March of 2005 when we got Bam Bam, and we would just after we got on the queue for the first hold, they told us we had to make our decision by a certain date, if we wanted him or not, and that we were to come to the BLM holding facility at Canyon City in the prison to come see him to make sure that he was the horse we wanted. So we did that. We had to turn in our ID information to the prison so that they could vet us through just the vetting process to make sure that we were okay to go into the prison and we weren't bad people. And so we got that clearance and went in and we saw him. The trainer rode him first to show us what he could do. And then I was able to get on him and ride him. And as soon as I rode him, I knew, yes, this was a horse we wanted. We made the decision right then and there. We were able, at that time, they had, when they were so accommodating to adopters, they had a policy where if you lived within 150 miles of the facility, they would deliver the horse free. So we scheduled delivery, and Bam Bam was delivered to us. It's actually a real shame that this WHIP program was discontinued and that eventually the whole facility was closed. Um, we don't know where this is going. We're praying that it's not part of Project 2025, where they plan to try and rid the country of all the wild horses. So anyway, we it's just a shame that the facility closed because they did such a good job. They adopted out thousands of saddle trained horses to good homes at the same time that the inmates were learning real life skills that they could use when they got out. But now, how did Chaco do in the 1.5 years where we had him? It was, we didn't put him into the lesson program immediately with students. I would ride him in a simulated lesson with other riders on our other horses. The other riders were either my business partners or our advanced student camp counselors. And we would put him in these simulated lessons, teaching him how to do what we did and when to do it. And he was a willing learner and he did wonderfully. During the first summer he was with us, he was, we would have what I called Mustang Day every Wednesday. And Mustang Day at camp, the kids would all learn about Mustangs. We would have Chaco out for them to play with, just groom and hug and climb on him bareback, stuff like that. And just to see how he was acting, and he loved it. He loved attention. Uh, I eventually did then put him into lessons with our more advanced riders, and then gradually moved them down to the less advanced riders. While his natural personality had always been a low impulsion, almost lazy kind of energy level, he did learn how to do all the things we did at camp, and he did them fine for a while. But then things began to gradually change. Chaco started becoming less willing to follow the student rider cues. He actually became obstinate. And then he began biting both the campers, the students, and even our teenage counselors. So I have always taught my students to understand why horses act in the way they are. Are they hurt? Are they tired? Are they just testing you? Are they being stubborn? Or are they afraid? So many reasons. And I teach the students that it's so important to know why, to know how to deal with that problem. So, for example, you don't want to try to force a horse to do something when that horse is afraid. In that case, you need to give that horse confidence and trust. There are many ways to react to the different problem actions of the horse when you understand why they are acting that way. And Chaco was telling me very clearly that he did not appreciate having continually different riders on his back. He didn't appreciate beginner riders who were giving him conflicting cues. His confusing his confusion was causing him anxiety about all these different factors that were affecting him. It became apparent that Chaco needed a single individual, or at the very least, one family that he could work with and be understood by. He needed to bond with someone specifically and totally, and not try to be everything to everyone and so many. Although we all loved Chaco, we decided we had to do what was best for him and what he wanted, We looked for a person who could be his forever partner. This is, and where he could be happy. This is the sale flyer that we put out about Chaco. And this just shows this on this page, you could actually see some of the photos of him being in lessons. This was his beautiful confirmation. He was a lineback done with beautiful, thick mane and tail, long tail. He had the tiger striping on his legs, the primitive markings. And then here you can see a bareback rider on him here. Here you can see him approaching the cavaletti, getting ready to jump at a canter. Here you see another bareback rider on him, just being led by a camp counselor. Here he's just going over a triple stack of poles. And you can see how well he was doing. This lower left picture is on Mustang Day with the kids crowding around Chaco and giving him a lot of attention. Here he is ready for horse show day. Here he is doing the dead man with the kids doing the dead man's hang on him, perfectly stable and tolerant. Here he is when the kids are doing their balanced cool down where they stick out their arms like a windmill and take their feet out of the stirrups and totally relax and go just let the horse walk along to do their cool down after their lesson. So you can see he was just a wonderful horse until he decided he just couldn't do it anymore. We are actually able to find the perfect partner for Chaco. It was a 14-year-old girl who came to see him with her family. The girl was in Western Airs, which is a group riding thing where they do demonstrations and events. She wanted her own horse for the Western Air purpose, and we discussed the problems he was having with us and why, and they were confident they would overcome these issues. They bought Chaco from us and they renamed him Spirit because, as you can see, he looks exactly like the Disney Mustang that was named Spirit in the movie of the same name. So he found his calling. Since then, I've had experience with other Mustangs and other lesson programs. Our Sun Pony Ranch riding lesson and horse camp business survived the economic recession of 2008, 2009, and continued to grow and thrive until we had to sell the property and close the business in November 2017 for health reasons of one of our partners. Then, because I had become so active as a wild horse and burro advocate, I began working with the nonprofit In Defense of Animals as their director of wild horse and burro program. And however, during that time, I was missing the personal contact with horses that so I also started working at a lesson barn, another lesson barn where I became a natural horsemanship instructor there, and I am still currently working there. I have since retired from In Defense of Animals, but in that capacity, I did so much more work on wild horse advocacy. But in this new job as an instructor at the new facility at a different barn, we had a barn manager who tried bringing in other Mustangs for the lesson program there. This barn manager bought the horses from a well-recognized wild horse trainer, and the horses had done well with her and were well trained. However, once they were put into a lesson program at our facility where I currently work, they started having the same problems that Chaco was having. They couldn't tolerate the continually changing riders for one reason or another. And this is not to say that this small sampling of wild horses that I have worked with in lesson programs is the norm. I don't know if it's the norm, but it is my feeling that perhaps the Mustang personality really, really wants a stronger bond with an owner that has them that they can work with. Because out in the wild, you know that the horses have very strong bonds with their family. And that, I think, kind of transfers in their mind to when they become non-wild anymore and are in a domestic situation. I think they really need a strong bond. But again, this is just my opinion. It is not a proven fact. But now, back to when we had to sell our ranch, my biggest concern was for our wonderful herd of lesson horses. It was only through my wild horse and burro work that I ever learned about horse slaughter. It is shocking to me that I never knew about horse slaughter until I started learning about wild horses and burros. I don't know how that could have ever escaped me, but apparently that is common with most people. Most people do not know about horse slaughter. So when I found out about this shocking horse slaughter industry, I was determined that I would never allow any horse that I knew to get into that slaughter pipeline. And as wild horse, we're all wild horse and burro advocates. That's why we're here on Chris's presentations. We're learning about wild horses and what happens to them. And in my previous presentations in other years, I talked a lot about wild horses and roundups and what happens to them, lots of different things. But this year, talking about them in a lesson program, I also want to raise awareness of the fact that these domestic horses also are in the horse slaughter pipeline. So while we work hard to bring awareness about all these Mustangs that are in kill lots, kill pen lots, and trying to save them out of there, I want everyone to still know that there are wonderful domestic horses that have given everything in their lives to an owner who then discards them. And it's so sad. And so I want to give you a little bit of information about that because any one of these horses that we had in our program could have ended up there. 4 of them did end up there and were pulled out just in time. But because of the health problems of one of our partners, we had to sell our property and our businesses. And because nobody was crazy enough to buy both a horse business and a dog kennel business, which was 24/7, 365 job, we ended up only being able to sell the property with the dog business on it. So I had to find homes for all of our horses. So I'm going to show you real quickly our wild horses and give you a quick version of their story to see um, how if they would have ended up in the slaughter pipeline, it would have been a tragedy. Any horse ending up in the slaughter pipeline is a tragedy, but my oh, this was so when we had to close our business, I worked very hard to find forever homes for our school horses. This is just one for Tyga. Tyga was adopted to the same family that adopted Romeo's. They loved them both. So this was just the questionnaire I had everybody fill out. I also had a contract that everyone signed. Um, our amazing families that came to our riding school, our amazing families stepped up to the plate, and all of our horses were adopted out to forever homes. They signed a contract that said that they would keep the horse and care for the horse and love the horse forever. And if anything, any kind of circumstances popped up where something happened where they could no longer keep the horse, they were to let me know and I would take the horse back. Even though I had no property, I would find a place for to board them and keep the horse. So this contract was kind of a courtesy because I knew these families, I knew they were going to take care of these horses. But the way that we did it was we gave priority to those families that could take two horses so that they would at least go to a new place with a member of their herd. So now I'm just going to highlight our lesson horses and show you how they are just taking care of these kids. This is Jordan. He was a 17 hand high, dark bay, off the track thoroughbred. And in this picture, you can clearly see that he's in a hand gallop. All 4 feet, all 4 hooves are off the ground with his shadow underneath. So this is Jordan in a soft, slow, gentle gallop, helping this young rider learn to relax. Jordan was my business partner's Monica's horse. She adopted him from the Colorado Horse Rescue, and that was where we were both volunteering at the time before we started our business. So she had him for a few years before we started our business, so he was our first horse. This is Shoshone. Shoshone is a paint mare, and she was the second horse we got. We bought her from an individual young man. He had trained her on his girlfriend's ranch. And then when he broke up with his girlfriend, he had no place to put Shoshone. So we bought her from him. She was only 3 years old when we bought her. And when our vet came out to do the vet check on her, he was concerned. He said, "This is a really young and kind of feisty horse. How are you going to put her in a lesson program with little kids?" Well, you can see in this picture, she adapted just fine. She would be crazy gallopy horse when she knew the rider could handle it, or even when she just wanted to run. But when she had little kids on her like this, she took care of them. Now, I used to say that Shoshone had two two gates: stop and run as fast as you can. But here she shows you she can take care of little kids. And look at the smile on that little girl's face. This is Harley. He was the next horse we got. He was a chestnut quarter horse gelding. And here he's helping a very young beginner learn how to canter. We got Harley from a horse trader. This horse trader would buy horses real cheap at auction in Nebraska and then bring them back to Colorado to sell for a much higher price. But again, at the auction, they were being sold price per pound. And so he didn't have to pay very much for them. Harley was a wonderful, sweet old guy, and he did so well for us. This is Romeo. He's a chestnut Appaloosa gelding. Here it shows him trotting the poles, weaving in and out of the poles at a trot. We got him from the same horse trader at the same time that we got Harley. And when we went to see these horses, the horse trader had not ridden Romeo. He had bought him simply because of his gorgeous, good looks with his Appaloosa blanket uh, and beautiful conformation. So he bought him purely off looks, knowing that he could sell him. But when he got on to ride him to show him to us, in just a couple minutes, he said, "Oh boy, I totally underpriced this horse. This horse is worth a lot more." But he honored his price, which was $1,250 to us. And Romeo was worth thousands. Just an amazing horse who did well forever in our program. This is Shadow. Shadow was he's a gray quarter horse gelding. He was actually saved directly out of a slaughter lot. A woman who would visit the slaughter lot where they were getting ready to ship to Mexico. She would regularly visit these lots and pick out horses that she thought she could resell and save them. She wasn't going to save Shadow. As she was walking through the kill pens, Shadow just followed her with his nose in her back and at her side and wouldn't leave her alone. And he was just so gentle and sweet. And even though he was lame, his feet were in horrible condition. She knew she couldn't leave him there, so she adopted him at the same time as she adopted the next horse you're going to see, Rio. And even though Shadow was lame, when we went to visit him at this woman's place, I got on him just to see how he responded to cues. And instantly I knew he was a highly trained horse and that we could fix him. So we did buy him from her and we put weight on him. He was skin and bones with horrible hoof condition in just terrible shape. But after we got him, we fattened him up a little bit. He's always been a hard keeper, needing a lot of beet pulp, etc. But we fattened him up, got him back in condition, and I soon found out that he had been trained as a roping horse. How did I know that? Well, he was a roping horse and a reining horse. And when I got on him, Western, he would do beautiful spin turns and slide stops. This was after he was well, obviously. But also, when we had our beginner riders or any of our lesson riders on him, and we would do cool down and have them drop the reins and drop their stirrups, the first couple times when we did that on Shadow, he would stop dead like a roping horse, knowing that his rider was going to fly off and go down the rope line to tie the calf. So that's how we figured out that Shadow was such a highly trained Western reining horse and roping horse. But Shadow was so gentle that if a person with longer legs got on him and squeezed, he was instantly off in a gallop. But when little riders got on him and learned how to relax, he would take care of them. He would take my 5-year-old grandson for rides in the arena. I wouldn't even be holding on to him. I would just stand there and say, "Walk, Shadow," or "Trot, Shadow," and Shadow would just do it so slow and easy, taking care of my little 5-year-old grandson who was just sitting there hanging on and giggling and laughing. This is Rio. Rio was a chestnut Arabian gelding who was also saved from the slaughter lot by the same woman who saved Shadow. We bought Rio from her, and I called Rio my $1 million horse. He could do anything. He could jump 4 feet. He could ride Western, English, neck rein, direct rein. He could do anything, and he was a favorite for bareback riding because he was short and comfortable. Here he's helping a young rider learn how to canter bareback with a loose leg, balance, and relaxation. This is Jack. Jack was a dark bay standardbred gelding. He's with his rider on horse show day. You can see how she's decorated him, braided up his mane. Shadow, we bought from a person who had only had him a short time, and she had bought him from an Amish family that had used him as a buggy horse. We didn't have a buggy, so we never were able to try that, but he turned into a wonderful, wonderful saddle horse who was a really great lesson horse. This is Bambi. She was a bay Trakehner mare. As you know, a Trakehner is a warm blood breed that they often use for dressage and 3-day eventing. Here she is helping a young rider learn how to post the trot. Bambi belonged to our veterinarian. Our vet it actually belonged to his wife. His wife actually planned her breeding and raised her from a foal. And then for some reason they had to sell her, and they sold her to a family who was in California who used her for vaulting and other similar disciplines. But she went lame with them. They didn't take good enough care of her. She went very lame. And so our vet took her back. He didn't want her to end up in the slaughter truck. So he took her back and he gave her to us. He knew that we were going to be able to strengthen her and get her back sound, and that she would be good for our lesson program. And she was absolutely wonderful. She was really good with advanced riders learning to jump higher jumps. This is Katie, who is a red roan quarter horse type mare. She was saved from the slaughter truck when she was just a foal. And if you don't know anything about the Premarin program, Premarin is a drug that is derived from pregnant mare urine, hence the name Premarin. And it's a horrible industry that is legal in Canada, where they take mares, get them pregnant, and put them in a standing stall tied to a bag to collect their urine. These stalls are just stand-up stalls, very narrow. They can't lie down, they can't turn around, they can't do anything, and they stay in there for the entirety of their pregnancy, giving out this urine that they make the drug from. It's a horrible, horrible industry. And one of the worst parts is that when the foals are born, they are disposable. So they are just loaded onto the slaughter truck and sent off. This little mare was saved as a foal by a woman and her partner who saved Katie and another foal. The other foal was so sickly it died right away, but Katie prospered. The woman lived in Connecticut, and her partner moved to Colorado with Katie, and we never took ownership of Katie, but they had her live with us to be in our lesson program, and they didn't even visit her or anything. They just trusted us to take good care of her, and we did. And then when Katie came to us, she was already a mare. She wasn't a baby anymore, and she was already saddle trained. So we trained her into the lesson program, and she became invaluable to us. This is Tyga. Tyga was a saddlebred paint cross mare, Pinto, and I used Tyga and Shoshone to teach our students about the difference between a paint horse and a Pinto. Tyga was a Pinto, but she wasn't a paint, even though she did have some paint blood in her. But a paint horse is a breed, a Pinto is a color. So Shoshone was both a Pinto and a paint, and Tyga was a Pinto who was a saddlebred cross. We got Tyga from an acquaintance of Monica's who had her and didn't know how to manage her. Every time they tried to ride her, she would act up, and so they would immediately put her back in her stall and give her a bucket of grain. So this was training the horse to have bad manners, and they just didn't even know the difference. This horse would have ended up in the slaughter pipeline if somebody didn't recognize her potential. And when we got her, we found when I first rode her at this woman's home, I saw that she was going to be a wonderful horse for us. And as you can see, she's just turned into a beautiful, wonderful lesson horse. And here she's helping a young rider learn how to stay balanced and centered while jumping over the medium cavaletti on a loose rein. This is Legend. Legend was a Morab. That's a Morgan and Arabian cross. And he was a bay gelding. He helped our young, in this picture, he's helping our young rider learn posture and positioning as they start their lessons. Legend belonged to a family that also used our same veterinarian. And when Legend's rider was a teenager and decided to go off to college, the parents couldn't take care of Legend. So they wanted her to go to a place where when their daughter graduated from college, she could get her back. So again, we never took ownership of Legend. Legend just stayed with us for the 4 years his owner was in college, and Legend just was a super wonderful horse for our program. I don't have many pictures of Joey, but Joey is this Palomino horse back here. He was such a hard keeper. It was hard to get good pictures of him. He was such a hard keeper. We could not keep weight on him. When we bought him, uh, when we got him, he hadn't been ridden for at least a couple years, and his muscle tone was gone. It took a lot of care, gallons and gallons of beet pulp, and then plus senior feed every day, and we still couldn't bulk him up enough to where he was looking really good. But he was healthy, he was strong, and he he worked well in our lesson program, but eventually we let him retire to a family with a pasture where he could be a companion horse, to their horse and just a pasture ornament. And the last horse we're showing here is Faith. She was a young Cremello mare who was saved from the slaughter truck. The story is that we had our dog kennel business on the property where we did dog boarding and doggy daycare, and one of our kennel workers adopted Faith, found her in the slaughter lot and adopted her to save her. Again, we did not take ownership of this horse. We kept her for our kennel worker on our property and used her in our lesson program. And then when we closed the ranch, this woman had her own place and could take Faith back. But here she's beautiful Faith helping a beginner rider learning to post the trot. So that pretty much does it for my presentation. I just wanted to use this last part here to show you how, as wild horse advocates, we're totally working to try and stop the horse slaughter industry. We're trying to get the SAFE Act passed, and we kind of focus on the wild horses, but I wanted you to know and also appreciate that domestic horses who give us everything and work so hard for us and then are discarded by their thoughtless owners who only want to make a buck, they end up in the pipeline to slaughter, and we need to stop all of it. So I hope that will, I hope that gives you something to think about and understand the Mustang personality and differences and how we work with them. So that's it.
Thank you, Ginger. That was a wonderful presentation. And for anybody else, if you didn't see Ashley Avis's presentation, she talked a great deal about the SAFE Act in the Wild Beauty Foundation's campaign, the lost horses that they're doing um, to try to get the SAFE Act passed. Someone did mention in one of the last couple of presentations that there were new sponsors for the SAFE Act, so it does look like it has a really good chance of passing. Um,
Chris, can I say something about that?
yep.
The SAFE Act has been introduced in Congress every 2 year session for probably the past 15, 16 years.
Oh.
And in the last several sessions, many sessions, it has gotten co-sponsors in the House of over 200, well enough to pass every single year, co-sponsors in the House of Representatives. But it has never been moved and passed in the Senate. They have never been able to bring it up in the Senate to pass. So while it always looks great, oh boy, it's ready to pass in the House of Representatives, they don't even it doesn't get to the Senate. So it's discouraging, but we're going to keep trying.
I know that Ashley is working with Congresswoman Titus a lot, and maybe
Yep,
the new Wild Horse Caucus might be able to help get it to the floor for an actual vote.
right.
So
Yep.
hopefully. Um, but yeah, so everyone make sure that you're contacting your senators and your representatives and just asking them to support this. That's one way that we can do something to help. So, does anybody else have any questions for Ginger? Thank you again, Ginger. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We always learn so much from you. So thank you again. We appreciate it. And I just want to let people know our next presentation will be at 1 o'clock today. And for anyone who signed up for Grace's presentation tomorrow, on Monday, we have to cancel that. Grace had an emergency. She's very sorry, and we're working on rescheduling that. If we can't do it within the time of the summit, then we will do it afterward because Grace does have a lot of great information to share. So I appreciate all of you for being here, and I'll see you guys at 1 o'clock. Thank you again, Ginger.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.